gun and shoot for the sky.
All right, and we're live. Hello and welcome to the Ring Post Daily Podcast. You're listening to myself, Jesse Henrik, the RPD Prophecy Champion, Tyreek Ramsey, Eddie Wade, the future champ, and our guest today, El Flaco Loco. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you guys. What time is it? I know that we're all in different areas. I'm looking at my notes here, and yeah, you guys are all in different. Oh wait, no, Ty, you're in Washington, right? Yeah, so we're at the same time. So it's 4 o'clock where we're at.
It's 4 for you guys. For Eddie, it should be 7, and for me, it's 6.
Oh well, good evening.
You guys are in the future.
Yeah. Good evening, Eddie, and good early evening, late afternoon, Jesse.
Thank you.
And hey, hi, Tyree.
and of course, we send a shout out
Good to see you.
Joey Hudson, who unfortunately was not able to be here tonight.
Okay.
All right. So I guess my first question is, how did you get into the business? Were you professionally trained? Did you learn as you went? Did you kind of have like a mentor? How did that work for you?
Well, it's kind of funny, like everyone else, if you want to go back to my first wrestling match was probably in my living room, body slamming, sofa pillows and things like that. But as El Flaco Loco, I actually started wrestling before I was trained. And the shows that I was wrestling on were huge. There's this venue in San Francisco that maybe you've heard of called the Fillmore. And it's a legendary venue. Bill Graham would put on massive shows there. And with the wrestling ring, it would seat about 1,500 people. And it was a promotion called Incredibly Strange Wrestling. And El Flaco Loco was a wrestler. I wrestled for them, and I had zero training. I had never even been in a ring. The first time I went into my first match was my first time in a wrestling ring. And looking back on videos of those, yeah, it was obvious I was not trained. It was pretty bad. But the whole thing about these shows, Incredibly Strange Wrestlings, all the characters were way over the top characters. And when fans would come in, the way the shows were set up is they would have a band play, and then there'd be 30 minutes of wrestling. Then another band would play and 30 minutes of wrestling. And and I'm not even exaggerating. I know in wrestling we exaggerate numbers, but literally about 1,500 people crammed into the Fillmore. And each person, when they came in, would get a stack of tortillas, corn tortillas. And while the wrestlers would wrestle, look this up. You can find footage of old Incredibly Strange Wrestling, and people would fling tortillas at the wrestlers. And Eddie, I'm sure you can relate how annoying that would be. Like when fans are actually encouraged to throw things at the wrestlers.
Yeah.
And so you can only imagine if you've ever been in a wrestling ring, what it's like running in a wrestling ring that's covered in smashed corn tortillas. It was not pretty. It was not pretty at all. And it would take like a week to wash that cornmeal out. So, but anyway, that was my introduction to actually, being El Flaco Loco and wrestling for a promotion called Incredibly Strange Wrestling. And then while I was doing that, and of course, if your first time wrestling, you're wrestling in front of 1,500 people and they're all going crazy just because, you think it's because of you, but actually it's because they're drunk off their rocker. And someone gave them someone gave them tortillas to fling at the guys in the masks. And then I saw an independent show here in my own hometown of Sacramento, and it was called back then it was called Sacramento Pro Wrestling, and I went to it, and there was, it's your typical independent show turnout, maybe about 80 to 100 people there, and it was a much smaller crowd, and I sat in the audience, and I wasn't thinking to myself, we have more people here at Incredibly Strange Wrestling. I watched, and I was like, oh wow. This is the real deal. This is the real thing. And it reminded me a lot of the first concert I ever went to was this big concert at a huge arena. And that was great. But then I remember going to my first punk show at this little tiny rundown venue with about 15 other people, and it was right there in your face, and it just felt real. There was something so genuine about it. And that's when I said, okay, I gotta stop making a mockery of this and jumping around in a ring with corn tortillas being thrown at me, and I got to learn how to do this the right way. And so then I figured out who was running that promotion in my hometown, and I started training there. And that was about 1999 that I started doing that. I'd wrestled in for Incredibly Strange Wrestling starting in 97. So I did that for about 2 years. And then I decided to get real and learn how to actually do a collar and elbow.
It does sound like
You know,
the funnest place. It does sound like the funnest place to work.
I'm telling you, it's wild. If you just look it up, Incredibly Strange Wrestling. It kind of splintered off into two. There was an LA Incredibly Strange Wrestling and a San Francisco one. I was involved in the San Francisco one, and it's amazing. You know, I have amazing experiences. I don't want to downplay the experiences I had and how much fun it was and the people I got to meet and that I still keep in contact with. It was great. But for me, when I saw a real independent wrestling show, and that's when after I'd started wrestling, and I'm like, this is what I want. I want something real. I want something genuine. And it didn't matter if there wasn't 1,500 people there. You know, some of the best, and Eddie, maybe you can relate to this. Some of the best wrestling shows, you have that crowd of about a couple dozen people, but they're way into it, and it's just like you feed off that energy. And likewise, I've been on shows where there's hundreds, if not thousands, of people, but you just don't feel that energy back from them.
And you know,
it's like music.
There's something said for, you know, stereotypes in wrestling, because there are, and not all of them are bad, but just hearing you talk about the tortillas flying at you, that has to be the most stereotypically indie-rific luchador thing I've ever heard.
Oh yeah. Oh, right now, you know, it's like if you're in a horror punk band, Halloween, everyone wants to book you for Halloween. You know, coming up this weekend, everyone who's wearing a mask is booked for Cinco de Mayo somewhere. And like, you know, it's just like, hey, you wear a mask, you're a luchador, get in there. You know, so yeah, looking back, I'm like, okay, it is kind of, you know, let's put on the bullet belts and this big sombrero for Cinco de Mayo, but
right,
whatever, you know,
but it's all in good nature, at least, you know.
I had fun. I don't look back on it going, I'm so offended. You know, I'm an old guy. I don't get offended. I grew up on Mel Brooks movies. You can't offend me. Really.
It sounds like a good time, honestly.
And so, yeah, and I would think people who look back and who see footage of Incredibly Strange Wrestling and they're offended, I'm like, well, you weren't there. You don't get it. You know, so it doesn't offend me. It was just like, I just saw it as like, okay, I want to do something more legit. And that's exactly why I started training and started doing something which to me was much more real.
Awesome.
Yeah, so you made a tweet earlier this year just saying that professional wrestling is so amazing that some of you truly don't deserve it. And so being a 20-year vet in the business, what, in your opinion, from your standpoint, what makes pro wrestling so amazing?
To me, it's the connections that I've made with wrestlers. When it's kind of funny, you know, being a musician, a local musician, and a local independent wrestler, and as well, my shoot job is as an educator. I'm a teacher. When I got married.
Your students.
Oh, they don't know anything. It's a total hidden identity. I'm just boring old teacher. All right, you know the movie Up, that animated feature. The old guy with the suspenders and the bow tie who looks like he's always grouchy. That's what I look like when I'm teaching. So they don't see El Flaco Loco. They don't see the rock and roll guy jumping around playing 3 chords on a guitar. So I keep those things separate. But anyway, what makes it special is like when we got married, you know, there's my family there, and teachers and musicians and wrestlers. And I remember my wife saying, you know, I can tell your teachers love you, and your musician friends love you, but I can tell that your wrestling friends love you and would take a bullet for you. And it is a very mutual feeling. And I think that's one of the weird things about wrestling is not everyone gets it. Not everyone understands it. And you don't do this if you're too sensitive about your friends thinking it's a joke, or thinking it's, the F word, that rhymes with lake. I won't say it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of disrespect for what we do.
Damn it.
There's a
Damn it.
total lack of respect for what we do. And unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of people who are calling themselves wrestlers being very disrespectful to what we do. But I think what makes it so special is there's like this secret brotherhood and sisterhood of, we get it, we understand, and we're there for each other. And that's why I'm so looking forward to flying out for the 12-year anniversary of traditional Southern wrestling, because I'm going to be meeting so many people for the first time, but there's going to be that instant bond, that instant click. And I felt that way when I wrestled in Ohio this past summer, meeting these wrestlers for the first time. And there was this instant bond, this instant click. We get it. We understand each other. We've all been there, and we understand what it's like for our spouses to not understand. Why are you spending so much money for so little? Why are you spending all this money on gear, on gas, on hotel, on flights, on travel, by making your own merch if you're getting a very small percentage of that back? And no one gets it. But wrestlers get it. And so to me, to answer the question you asked about an hour ago, what makes it special is that secret bond that we all have. And I don't think a lot of people do. Not everyone deserves that.
Facts, because I can tell somebody tells me they watch wrestling. After having a convo about them about wrestling, you could tell kind of how deep, or if they get it or if they don't, or that type of deal, just based on the way they're talking.
And that was one of the reasons why I was so drawn to wanting to train and do this the right way. And I found that when I was training and I was learning the specifics of wrestling and the psychology of wrestling, that like wrestlers that I was never a fan of, I started appreciating more. And just like, wow, this guy is really technically sound, or wow, this woman really knows her ring placement. And so that, I think that's another interesting thing, is like your average fan will like a certain wrestler, and then a trained wrestler will go, okay, yeah, I get that, but this is one you should really look at. And it might not be the most famous wrestler, but you're watching them a little differently. It's like we're like jazz musicians. We appreciate little quirky things about other wrestlers that the average fan may not notice.
Yeah, well, and that's what's great about professional wrestling is it is at its core a variety show. I mean, that's why it succeeded when it in its infancy, when it was part of the the carnies and the carnivals, because it drew everyone in, whether you're a child, whether you're a fan of suspense or horror or action. There is something for everyone in professional wrestling. So I think that's what really makes it special too.
All right, so my next question would be, and this is a question from our colleague Joey. He wants to know if you can name a wrestler who should be in the Hall of Fame that isn't yet. Who would that be?
Adrian Adonis.
No hesitation.
Adrian Adonis.
No hesitation.
No hesitation at all. Adrian Adonis, and and I say it just like that because just the other day, my trainer, the Big Ugly, and I, we were ranting and raving about how when you think WrestleMania 3, there's two matches that everyone thinks of. Number one, Hogan Andre. That's the one that packed the stadium. And then the other one, a lot of wrestlers, they think Savage Steamboat.
Yeah.
What a classic that was. But for us, one of the things we bond on is like the match that stands out to me is Piper Adonis. And Roddy Piper and Adrian Adonis, it's storytelling at its very best. And when you're watching that as a trained wrestler, and you see how much Adrian Adonis gives to the match, how much he gives to the storytelling, and what he puts himself through, you can't help but be a fan. And I just remember as a little kid watching Adrian Adonis, and he had like kind of this biker character, and then that transformed into kind of this this version of an exotic Adrian Street type of character. But now going back and watching how he worked as Adrian Adonis, exotic Adrian Adonis. It's just like what an amazing performer he was, and he's someone that I don't think a lot of people, I don't think enough people give credit to as being an amazing worker, an amazing storyteller, and I mean, when you take Roddy Piper, who was like one of the all-time greatest villains of wrestling,
Absolutely,
and because of your actions, you turn him into one of the biggest heroes of wrestling. That's talent. That's talent. Not anyone could do that. It's like if someone says, "Okay, this person that everyone hates, that starts riots, you're going to have to make everyone cheer for them." That's a tall task.
Yeah.
That is no small order.
No.
All right. Well, thank you, Eddie. Go ahead.
So I will be actually I will be participating in the training class that you will be teaching June the 1st. And my question for you is, what is the first thing you teach students when teaching them about the ins and outs of the business and in ring, or what's your starting point?
If you want to, this is as real or as
the first
as
the
diluted
first
as
the
you
first
want.
thing. Well, don't want to give it all away for free. But no, the first thing I will share this with you, Eddie, and this is something that I'll mention to anyone else and if it's just you and I and Michael Sean there, then you're going to get this all again. The first step of professional wrestling starts right up here. And it's looking across the ring and not seeing that person as your opponent, but seeing them as your partner. And that's your partner in telling a story. And if you're in a tag team match, you have multiple partners. You have your tag team partner, and then you have the two partners across the way. You also have a partner as the referee. And one of the things I can't stand, I'm sorry if I'm going off base, is that everyone thinks that anyone can be a referee. A referee is such an important part of a wrestling match. That referee is also your partner in that match. And if you have managers, those are also your partners in that match. So I think the most important thing, the first thing that I'm going to stress is that you have to get into the mindset that that person across the ring is my partner. And our job is to put on a competitive match that tells a story, that engages people, and that for the next 10 to 15 minutes, everyone sitting in that audience is going to forget about all their problems because they're so invested in what we're doing. I think that's the first thing, because I think there's and Eddie, you probably experienced it. I hope you haven't, but you may have experienced this, where you have some wrestlers that are self-marks and they think it's all about getting all their stuff in and making themselves look good. And it's all about them without looking at the bigger picture. It's about the match. And also it's about the show itself. You have to, if someone has a finisher, like I was watching some footage of one of the shows, and I saw a finishing move that someone did that was one that I was thinking of doing, but now I'm not going to do that because it's that person's move. You watch any TSW show, don't do the monkey flip.
Yes.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't you do a monkey flip?
Mike Murphy's.
I'm going to ask you, Eddie, why wouldn't you do a monkey flip in your match on a TSW show?
Because that's what Mike Murphy does.
Yeah, that's his signature right there.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of wrestlers will think, well, I can do that too. And so it's like, God, there's so many shows out here in California where you see the same freaking move over and over and over again. It's like, God, can we not see 18 super kicks in this match?
I was about to say, you must
can we
be
not
drowning.
see the strong style spot? Yeah,
you must be drowning in super kicks
I think
and Canadian destroyers.
Oh my God! It's like, let's not do that. Let's not do that. So start thinking about the show and realizing your place on the show. Okay, I'm opening match. Here's what I'm not going to go out and fight in the crowd. I'm not going to involve with, because we're going to build. This is a show. I'm a part of a show. My match is part of a show. That person across the ring, we're working together to be a part of this show. And I think that's the biggest thing, is the mindset, is getting everyone into that mindset that person is my partner. So when we're going over some of these, some of the chain wrestling and some of the moves and some of the sequences, we're working together to tell that story. So I think that's the main thing, is the mindset. Because I'm not a great athlete, but I'd like to think that I have I'm on the right side of having the proper mindset.
That's awesome. We
Mhm.
love
Mm.
we love that
That's
that kind of that little sneak peek of what these students can look forward to with your upcoming seminar. So thank you for that. That was huge, and we hope that maybe having that, it will inspire some people to go to the seminar.
Yeah,
So
well,
thank
I
you.
hope so. It's going to be it'll be a fun time. I'm looking forward to, and like I said, I'm looking forward to sharing some of the things that I've learned from my trainer, the Big Ugly, who this is my chance to brag about him. He also trained Timothy Thatcher. He trained John Morrison, Johnny Nitro, Johnny.
Johnny,
Yeah,
Johnny of a
Johnny, whatever
thousand
promotion
names.
he's.
Johnny of a thousand
Steve.
Yeah,
names.
John Hennigan. If you look up the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast when he had John Hennigan on, he mentions the Big Ugly. He also mentions myself. Um, he also trained J.R. Kratos, who's currently in NWA. He trained referee Brian Nguyen, who is a referee in the WWE. And he recently worked. He's worked all the WrestleManias since he's been there. And he's also his son is also Titus Alexander. So if you're an independent wrestling nerd, you may have heard Titus Alexander. He's kind of an up and coming name in the independent wrestling scene.
Awesome.
So I'm looking forward to bringing some of the kernels of knowledge that I've learned from him, and then Michael Sean. We're going to set our differences aside for a training session. He's going to bring some of the things that he's learned. He was trained by ECW legend Mustafa Saeed, and he also helps run a training school here in California, in Lodi, California.
Wow. And
That's what's
we'll have
also cool
to.
is like, real quick, and just like, because of that connection you mentioned earlier in the other question of just all of us kind of knowing and loving it the way we do, like we're very like connected. You just named a bunch of legends that are kind of connected through us, and now we're kind of connected as well, just from that bond.
Well,
It's
and then the reason why I'm here, the reason why I'm flying out to Kentucky, is because of a man by the name of Mike Woody. Um, Mike Woody and Mike Murphy are the reasons why I'm coming out. Mike Woody has been one of my mask makers for the past 20 years. I'm wearing one of his masks right now, one of my favorites that he's done. And through him, I met Mike Murphy, and this is all online. So I'll be meeting them in person for the very first time, and I'm gonna mark out when I meet Mike Woody. Okay,
That's
this is a guy
awesome.
who I've spoken to on the phone, email back and forth, and we communicated. And I know my role. I call him Sir. He's one of the guys who's paved the way for so many people in the Kentucky wrestling scene, and he's done so much for me in terms of helping me develop my character with these masks. And so through him, I'm there's that connection back east. And I always told myself, I want to wrestle for him. I want to wrestle in front of him. I want to make my way out there someday. So and there was something a couple of years ago, Mike Murphy and I have been like communicating, hey, maybe someday, maybe someday, maybe someday. And then finally we got tired of saying maybe. And I said, all right, let's do it. Let's come up with a date. Let's find a date that you got. And we determined that the 12-year anniversary for traditionally Southern wrestling was the best opportunity. And I'm like, oh, let's do it. Let's run with this.
That's great, and it's so interesting and crazy at some points how well connected Mike Woody is in the industry, because we're talking about a man who made masks for Rey Mysterio. He has made masks for Curry Man, better known as Eric Young in TNA. He's made masks for so many different people, and when we the dark -1 in Dark Order. Um, it it's to the point where I go online, and when I'm searching for guests, and I'm like just looking around in the dark corners of wrestling Facebook, and I hear somebody mention making masks, and I'll see 20 people mention Mike Woody, and these are people who are not affiliated with TSW. They're not affiliated with Mike himself, and I'm like, wow, that's how much Mike Woody has permeated this industry over his 30, 40
one of
year
my
career.
one of the Yeah, one of my other another mask maker that I've used in the past in Mexico, he's heard of Mike Woody. He knows of Mike Woody. And he's like, yeah, we know who he is. He's the American who makes the lucha masks. You know,
Yeah.
so it's like he's respected. He's respected worldwide because of what he does, what he's done for other wrestlers with their masks. But then when you dig deeper and you realize, well, this guy also did it in the ring as well, you know, and he made a huge dent. And it, you know, if it wasn't, you got to imagine what the scene would probably be like in Kentucky and Tennessee area and out there if a guy like him wasn't around.
Yeah, I mean, it would certainly be different. Um, and you know, you just talked about how, you know, the guys in Mexico talking about how the American that, you know, makes lucha masks. It's interesting you bring up lucha masks specifically, because I wanted to ask you, kind of in your own words, how important is lucha libre to the zeitgeist of professional wrestling? Because, you know, you have that, you know, very American, you know, Canadian catch as catch can. You have, you know, Japanese strong style. You know, how does lucha fit into that, and where does it kind of has it kind of made its niche in your own words?
Well, there's a couple of different facets to lucha libre. There's a style of wrestling, and then there's the culture of it. The style of lucha libre, I think, is, I mean, you go to pretty much any indie show on the West Coast, and you're going to see lucha. You're going to see the arm drags, the dives, and all that. And at my age, I don't really do the dives anymore. I
Tope
might
Suicida, that's
see if I can
another
pull.
one that's really
Yeah,
used.
yeah. No, I'm not gonna do. Yeah, you probably I hate to break it to all the wrestling fans in Kentucky. You're not going to see a Tope Suicida from Flaco on June 1st. But I think it brings definitely the showmanship, the pageantry with the masks and with the costumes. As far as culture, it's a huge deal because much like Japan, it's more than just entertainment. It's getting in touch with that side of your culture, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to be a mass wrestler, why I wanted to be a luchador. You know, both of my parents are from Mexico. They moved to California, and they had the first three kids that they had all grew up kind of speaking mostly Spanish and then learning English. A number of years later, a surprise showed up. That was me. And by that time, the family was already speaking mostly English. And so my Spanish was very broken. I grew up an English speaker. And I always felt a disconnect to my Mexican culture. You know, even though I have my last name tattooed on my back in Gothic letters, and I always felt a disconnect to my Mexican culture. And so being a luchador was my way of making that connection, of being true to who I am, where I was from. And it's kind of funny because I remember when I was walking around at my mom's house when she was still alive, and I was wearing an El Santo shirt, and she just said, "You know, I met him." I'm like, "What?" She's like, because like lucha libre was the only form of entertainment that would go everything from the huge cities of Mexico City, the richest parts of the city, to the little tiny dirt towns where they just set up a beat up old ring in the middle of a farm and outdoors, and there'd be some bales of hay for people to sit on. And my mom and her sisters would go, not because they were fans of wrestling, but because there were boys there. So they would go as a social thing.
Something for
and
everyone.
Santo was like Santo was the big main attraction there. And after the show, he's signing autographs, and he asked my mom if she wanted an autograph. She's like, "Oh, that's okay." And I was like, "Mom, she's like, I didn't know." She's like, "I wasn't into wrestling." But that's how awesome lucha libre is because it was the thing that would reach all levels of society, from the richest of the rich to the poorest of the poor. And I think independent wrestling can do that as well, when it reaches these parts of the community that maybe don't get the live music. Maybe they don't have the art galleries. Maybe they don't have the theaters with the plays and all that. We can set up a ring. We can put it in a school gymnasium or in a parking lot or something, and we can bring this form of entertainment, this athletic spectacle, to people. And for an hour or two, they're going to forget about their problems.
And create a
And that's all
show.
we ask.
Moment.
Yeah.
And it's crazy you bring that up because wrestling in general, and not even just lucha libre, because the more you talk about it, the more I kind of see it. Wrestling itself very much does that, where it's an everyman sport. You look at the NFL, for instance. They're the zenith of football, and then you try to look in kind of lower ranks of that, and you really don't have things. I mean, you have college football, but that's about it. There's nothing on a lower or a middle ranking. Whereas you look at professional wrestling, and you have everybody from selling out 70,000 seat arenas to 400 seat like you said, gymnasiums. That's something we experienced over this last month, during WrestleMania weekend, where we watched 6 different pay-per-views all in a row. And there was literally from 400 people with MLW all the way up to the 70,000 WWE show for WrestleMania. So it's very interesting that wrestling does permeate all those different social classes, if you want to say that. So that's really interesting.
And sometimes and sometimes those smaller shows, those I'll say independent or intimate shows, can be even much more special to the wrestler and to the audience, because you have no other choice but to make direct eye contact with that kid in the front row. Like this past weekend, I was wrestling at this big old barbecue fest, and just at the time of the day, there were maybe 20, 25 people watching while we were wrestling. And I made sure to make eye contact with every single one of those people out there. And, that was important. You can't really do that on the giant shows where there's hundreds and hundreds or even 1,000 people there. It's kind of hard to do it. It's fun. And it makes for a great photo when you're standing there, and if you're the villain, you're standing there, and there's thousands of middle fingers pointing at you, which happened to me in Ohio. But there's also something really cool when you have those small, intimate shows, and you have no other choice but to make a connection with every single person in that audience. And you know what? Who cares if you don't hear the big giant pop? It's like you're gonna, like I said, for 10, 15 minutes, they're gonna forget about anything that's bothering them.
I've seen Eddie Wade just shouting at people in the crowd directly, and they're just back at him, just right here with him.
Yeah, and exactly. And you got to understand, it's like for some of these people, it might be their first wrestling show they've ever been to. I vividly remember the first wrestling show I was ever at. I was 7 years old. It's 1977. Okay, I'm an old guy, but I still have this vivid memory of Playboy Buddy Rose walking in a little TV studio, walking out into the ring, and I called him a big fatty head, and he told me to shut up, and I didn't say a word for the rest of the night. And I have that vivid memory in my head. I'm like, oh, and then fortunately, like decades later, I was at a Cauliflower Alley where they were honoring him, and I went up to him and told him that story. And he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I did." I'm like, "No, don't apologize. You taught me
That's amazing.
It's like you taught me everything about wrestling when you told me to shut up, because it was just, oh my God, this guy looked at me. He didn't just yell over my head. He made eye contact with me, and he said, 'You shut up, kid.' And he walked past, and I was like, I was frozen, and it was very real. And you can't. That's why I get so upset when people, disregard what we do, and like, because those are real emotions. And when I'm sure when Eddie's looking right in the kid's soul, pointing at him and saying something, that kid's going to remember that for a very long time. And it's a really cool thing when you think about it. Decades from now, one of those kids might be a wrestler, and they'll talk about, and they'll be on an interview show, and someone will be saying, "Tell us some of your earliest experiences." And there might be that kid who's going to say, "I remember I was at this show. There was this guy named Eddie Wade, and I yelled something at him. I called him a name, and he looked right at me, and he said something, and it just, had a huge impact on me." And that's what's really cool. We have that power as wrestlers to make to create those moments that are going to last a lifetime. I mean, we're looking at mine. Mine's a memory that's 45 years old. 48. I can't do the math right.
another thing. I don't really like it either. It's like this. You guys also put your bodies on the line, and it's like when people try to discredit what you do, it's like it's not only that emotional connection that's real, but it's like this stuff hurts, and and people and you guys can die in that ring. So I think people don't take it serious.
Mitsuharu Misawa died from taking a suplex. Pero Aguayo Jr. died from being set up for the 619, not taking the 619, just being set up for it. So it's not like your average, like I've been dealing with a banged up ankle for the past couple of weeks from a crossbody plancha that I just did recently. So that it's not like these crazy moves that are the only things that are dangerous. I mean, a suplex, a clothesline, a back elbow gone wrong, any of those things. I mean, we are putting our lives on the line, and that goes back into what I was telling Eddie earlier. It's like the first thing I tell you is like, that's my partner. So when I'm, hate to break down the fourth wall here, but when I'm throwing that suplex, my number one concern isn't that I'm making sure that I look good. My number one concern is making sure that that person that I'm giving a suplex to is landing safely and that they're protected.
That's great. And it's funny, I'm always telling my kids that, when we're watching wrestling together, I'm like, I tell them these people are not really trying to hurt each other. It's crazy to watch professional wrestling and see these very violent, things happening on the screen, and then, watching how they do protect each other. You give the example of a standard suplex, you never really notice it as a kid. You just notice, oh, this guy's, throwing this guy behind him and he's landing on his back. But what you don't notice is that he has his arm under that guy's head so that his head doesn't hit the mat. So that's one of those things you learn as a smart, wrestling fan, or that you learn over time. And it's really, eye-opening to watch those things in motion, when you do gain that knowledge.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there are some wrestlers who are in this business who still don't get that. They think that the purpose of a move is to make yourself look good, and word gets around. We're like, no, that person's unsafe. Don't take that move from that person. They don't get it. They don't understand. They don't have that mindset that that's my partner in there.
Right.
So. Yeah, I think it's like, I remember the first time I ever saw wrestling on TV, and oddly enough, the first wrestler that caught my attention was Mil Mascaras, who is Mike Woody's all-time favorite wrestler, and mine as well. And I remember my father was a big boxing fan, and this was back before pay-per-view, so all the fights were on TV, ABC Wide World of Sports. And I remember it was a Saturday morning, I'm watching TV, and I saw what I thought was a boxing ring, and there's these, my little 5-year-old mind, I see two guys in black underwear pushing each other. And I'm like, what's going on? What's this? And then I see the next match, two more guys in black underwear pushing each other around. And then the next match, there's a guy in black underwear. And then here comes this other guy in gold tights and a gold mask. And he hops over the top rope, and then he takes off his mask. There's another mask underneath. Oh my gosh, what is this? And I'm just mesmerized by this. And my father could have easily said, oh, this is fake. He could have said that, but he didn't. He said, well, they're not really fighting. I'm like, what? It's like, well, they're putting on a show for the people. It's like, oh, exactly. Okay. And he never said the word fake. But once he said they're putting on a show for the people, it was like, oh, okay. And I kept watching. And I was mesmerized by it. And then
I always kind of liken it to superhero movies for my 10-year-old. I always tell them, well, are those people really fighting? No. Well, neither are they. They're putting, like you said, they're putting on a show.
When people who are so into like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings give people crap for liking wrestling, I'm like,
I love that.
Yeah, literally.
It's like, do you really not?
You have a wand. You have a wand.
It's like, I'm a wrestling fan. Like, I'm a Slytherin. No, you're not. You're a 30-year-old woman.
Right.
Which one of us is more tangible?
And no knock on any of that. I mean, I'm a Star Wars nerd. I'm the biggest Star Wars nerd that you're ever going to find.
Right?
but it's like,
but don't
you
knock
know, when you
another
have these
person.
people
Don't
who,
knock another person.
yeah, you have these people who are like too refined for wrestling. I prefer the theater.
It is. It's like it's very much. It's different. It's like, we don't be viewing like Harry Potter and stuff like that way, but there's something about pro wrestling. People just see it that way.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also not only a lack of respect for the wrestlers, but a lack of respect for the wrestling fans.
Absolutely.
It's like, do you think that they don't have? Now, granted, there were some times when, you know, if I'm the villain of the show, that, you know, there's people who want to physically hurt me, and, you know, I have to make sure to, as I take my mask off as I go to my car, because they might be waiting in the parking lot for me, and that's happened a few times.
But isn't that the best? That
but
just shows how well you did
Oh,
your
it is.
job.
Oh, it is. Oh, yeah. It was the show in Yuba City, and I'm back. I'm in the locker room after the show, and someone said, "Hey, Flaco, there's a bunch of guys out in the parking lot ready to kick your ass." I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, apparently you said something that really upset. You said something that made their girlfriends laugh, that pissed them off, and they all want to kick your ass. I'm like, and I kind of remember I insulted them in front of their girlfriends or whatever, and so I'm like, oh, okay. So I just took off my mask, put it in my bag, and walked out, put on my baseball cap and my glasses, and walked out, and just walked right past them. And I can see them standing there waiting for the guy in the mask to come out. I'm like, eh. Now, granted, there are those people, but then there's also the people who can suspend their disbelief, and you know, they can cheer for someone, they can boo someone, and they can enjoy themselves for that time that they're at the show. And then once the show's done, they're not gonna, you know, harbor any ill feelings, I don't think.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people just don't respect wrestling fans. It's like, why wouldn't you? It's like, would you disrespect someone who's into theater, someone who's into Broadway? It's like that's not that person playing Romeo didn't actually kill himself just now, you know, and they probably don't even like the person playing Juliet, but they're acting like they love each other so much that they're willing to die for one another. But you still put yourself into that emotion, and it's like, what makes you think wrestling fans can't do that?
Right.
Exactly.
And it is. It's an insulting question always. Just like, wrestling's F, right? It's like you just off the bat, it's just the way the question is directed. It's like
another TSW wrestler, Cameron Blackstar, he left a chat for you saying that Lucha was his first introduction into wrestling, with WCW bringing over the style. He said Psychosis was his guy.
Oh yeah, Psychosis, Nicho, El Millonario. Yeah, and then, you know, when you have to credit. I think back then WWF tried to do it, but they just wasn't. It didn't catch on with their audience. And I think, you know, with Paul Heyman bringing in Psychosis and Juventud and Rey Mysterio, and then WCW bringing those to the mass. And you can argue who did it first, whatever. Who got more eyes on it? That's an easy answer. That was WCW. You know, yeah, Rey Mysterio did wrestle for cool. ECW first, but Eric Bischoff got more eyes on it, and it introduced a lot of people. The thing that would upset me about WCW is you'd have these amazing matches with like Dean Malenko and the likes of, you know, Dean Malenko versus Juventud, or Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis, and the whole time while they're doing this great match, the commentary is talking about the NWO showing up in a limousine. You know, ladies and gentlemen, later on tonight, it's like, talk about the match that's happening right now. So I just felt like they didn't get their just due. But no, that's cool, because I think Lucha Libre did catch a lot of eyes of a lot of the people who are wrestling right now, because it was much flashier, much more flamboyant, and it caught their attention and drew them into it. And that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm looking at my notes here. That's a Repic's partner, right?
Yes, yeah, that's Death Star. Just settled on their name. And I don't want to ever say that, you know, it wasn't cool, because it's always been cool, but Lucha really feels cool right now with the influx that we've seen on the national level, whether that's, you know, AEW bringing in all these guys like, you know, Commander and Dralistico, and, you know, all these CMLL guys like Black Taurus, And then you have WWE, who has, seemingly renewed their focus on, lucha wrestling as well, with the LWO, with, Legado del Fantasma, bringing back, guys like Carlito, Savio Vega, you know, it just feels really cool to see this, renaissance for lucha on the national scale.
Yeah, and there's also this weird connection between lucha libre and rock and roll. If you look up Lucha Vavoom, and they're based out of
Yes.
Southern California. They kind of
Yes.
it's kind of like music, burlesque, and lucha libre all rolled up into one.
I have heard
So
a
it's
lot of
kind of like this.
stories of
It's
Lucha
this. It's
Vavoom.
this. It's this weird. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I just saw my wife walk across the hallway. Not to get too sidetracked again, but she and some friends went to Mexico City on a trip recently. And one of the tours that they did was a lucha libre tour, where this guy, you go to this guy's house and he does a taco making demonstration, and then he does a whole presentation on lucha libre and talks about the history of it, and then you go to a lucha libre show. And so she got to go to a lucha libre show. She got to meet. He was Sin Cara, now he's Mystico. So she got to meet him after the show. So she's got a picture with her and Mystico, which was rad. But this is the weirdest thing, and this has nothing to do with anything we've been talking about. But the thing that she remembers the most is at the lucha shows, one of the concessions that they would walk around and sell was cup of noodles. So you'd have these women carrying trays, steaming cup of noodles, and people are eating ramen noodles as they're watching lucha libre. I'm like, where's this? I don't.
What's the
Yeah.
connection there?
There's no. Sure, why not? So maybe during at the anniversary show we can one time only we can have ramen noodles.
There you go. Speaking of
Right.
the connection of lucha libre and noodles, I did mean to ask you, how was your trip to Japan?
It was amazing. It was breathtaking. I hope everyone that I care about in my life gets to visit Japan. It's such a beautiful country. The people are beautiful. It's very clean.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I got to go to Rivera Steakhouse, and no, I didn't get a jacket because that's
I was
you
gonna
only get a
ask.
jacket for
I
this.
was gonna ask.
Now the story I hear, because I didn't go. I went just with my wife on vacation. Everyone thought I was booked there, and how'd you get booked in Japan? I'm like, oh, my wife just. Oh, no, I didn't wrestle. We went to a wrestling show, but no. The story I hear is the only way you traditionally get a jacket is a promoter brings you in after they booked you, and they go there after hours, and then they might get a jacket that way. So no, I'm not. I didn't get a jacket, and I'm not gonna buy one on Amazon. but I got to eat there. I wanted to be respectful to the restaurant, so I went outside to put on my mask and take a picture outside. But Japan was it's so amazing. They're beautiful people. They're very kind. They're very polite. The country is just absolutely amazing. It's such a fun time.
That's definitely a bucket list thing for me. I want to go down there during the Wrestle Kingdom time and see the Tokyo Dome and see Kirk and Hall,
That'd be
and
awesome.
I
Well,
would just love to do all that.
We went to a Tokyo Giants game,
Oh,
which
okay.
is going to a Japanese baseball game is completely different
Baseball's
from an American
huge over
baseball
there.
game. And there's chanting and cheering and organized chants and organized cheers while your players are up. It's not like American baseball. Oh, be quiet. He's about to pitch the ball. No, there's like horns and all that while your player is up to bat. And it's like college football and soccer all rolled up into one. And the Tokyo Dome's just where the Tokyo Dome's at. It's just an amazing section of Tokyo.
Nice. Now I gotta ask. You said you went to a show there, a wrestling show. Did you bring your gear just in case? Because they say bring your gear.
Bring your hey kid, I'm here just in case you need. No. We went to a show which is called Gleat Wrestling, GLEAT, and they're kind of like a feeder promotion for Noah.
Oh, okay.
So I was all excited because Kaz Hayashi was on the show. Sema was also on the show. And so it was a crazy good show. It was wild. most of the audience was women, which was awesome. Um, and it was just a crazy fun time, and it was in a very busy part of Tokyo where it's all nightclubs and all that. And then there's this wrestling show on the seventh floor of this building.
Wow.
And no, I didn't bring my gear. The only gear I brought with me to Tokyo was my mask, and that was specifically to take a picture outside Rivera Steakhouse.
Awesome. You'll have
But
to
next time,
you'll have to send me
Eddie
that
and I we're
picture.
gonna go work. Eddie and I are gonna go work Hurricane Hall next.
There you go.
There we go. There we go.
Let's do it.
All right, Ty, go ahead.
So I want to know who's been some of your favorite luchadors you shared the ring with, and also who would you say is on your Mount Rushmore of luchadors? Whether any company, any promotion, anytime, who would you choose?
As far as luchadors I've been in the ring with, I would say they would be people that most people wouldn't know unless you were out here on the West Coast. Because I haven't really had the opportunity to work with huge names in the lucha libre world. But like out here on the West Coast, is a wrestler named Arsenal, who's he's a military guy who is also a mass wrestler. He's amazing to work with. Another one that one of my dearest friends who used to be a mass wrestler and now he's face painted up, Chupacabra. If you ever look him up, he's amazing. He's wrestled quite a number of places before. So those are probably two of my favorites that I've had the opportunity to work with. You know, a lot of times I'm the only one on the show with a mask, with the crew that I usually run with. Which is I'm excited because there's a lot of mass wrestlers in traditional Southern wrestling, so that I won't be the only one with mask hair after the show.
I'm pretty sure most of those masks are made by Mike Woody too, if not all of them.
Yeah. So that's gonna be great. We got to get a photo of all the Mike Woody masks. We'll do a class photo together after the show.
There you go.
There you go. As far as Lucha Libre, my Mount Rushmore has to start with Mil Mascaras. For me personally, just because he was the first one, I would say El Santo, and Blue Demon, because those were El Santo and Blue Demon were really the yin and the yang of Lucha Libre in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I think Mil Mascaras kind of rounded that out and carried it on into the 70s and part of the early 80s. And then, of course, the person who's, I think, the most popular luchador of all time, Rey Mysterio Jr. I had an opportunity to meet Rey Mysterio Sr., his uncle, once, and he was upset because I was wearing an El Santo shirt. And Rey Mysterio Sr. was like the all-time villain. So there's a picture of us with my arm around him, and he's got the middle finger on my shirt. But I would have to say Rey Mysterio Jr. because not only is he an amazing worker, and he's been able to bridge that gap between American wrestling and independent wrestling and Lucha Libre.
Absolutely. And I mean, you could really say that WCW brought, Lucha Libre to the forefront, but I mean, Rey Mysterio picked up that baton and he really carried it for a long time in the US here through those, the early, or I shouldn't say early, but the mid 2000s all the way until kind of the later mid 2010s. You did not see a lot of lucha. So he was kind of carrying the banner.
Facts. So when I started watching 8 or 9 years old, you guys know that Ray's already in my just overall Mount Rushmore. It's just because he was not only like the coolest thing I seen when I was a kid, like as far as his gear, and he looked like a superhero, but he was always my favorite because he had the coolest moveset as well. I always just loved the way he would and be captivating.
And Lucha Libre is a different style altogether. Like if you watch a traditional lucha show, you watch like CMLL or AAA, you watch one of their shows and like they bump differently because their rings are different. Their rings aren't the same as our rings. Their rings are more along the lines of a boxing ring where they don't have any give. So when instead of taking a bump, they take rolls more often than anything else. And then also the rules of like if you're a casual fan is watching, why aren't they tagging? It's like a lucha match, they don't tag. You just have two people in the ring at the same time. One goes out, another one comes in. And so the rules are different. And I think what Ray needs to be credited for, not only for the showmanship and the ability and the charisma, but how he was able to bridge lucha libre with American wrestling, because it's two different types of wrestling. And that's why certain wrestlers who were huge in Japan, they don't really translate to American wrestling fans because it's a different style.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's one of the things that currently Okada is dealing with. Is like, I think a lot of people, he's trying to change his style, whereas like you got someone like Kenny Omega who is able to do the Japanese style and able to translate it into an American style of wrestling, because it is different. They are different in terms of how they're presented, and so to be able to transfer that over is not easy. Not easy.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned both those guys, because I feel like we really need to have a moment of silence for, you know, NJPW's whole main event division, because AEW has just gutted them at this point. I mean, they've taken Osprey, they've taken Okada, they've taken Jay White, they've taken Omega, everybody.
But the good news is, I think there are so many amazing wrestlers in Japan that people have never heard about. And I mean, you look up a promotion like GLEAT, and they're a feeder system to Noah, which is a bigger promotion. But it's like, man, these wrestlers were outstanding. They were so amazing. So I mean, just look them up online and just, you know, you'd be blown away.
Yeah, absolutely. Eddie, you've been quiet so far.
This next just been seeping into knowledge.
Sitting under the learning tree. At least this one doesn't involve Jericho.
This question comes from Joey. As a wrestling fan, he grew up on feuds such as The Rock and Austin, Orton and Cena. Could you tell us what your favorite wrestling feud is and why?
I'm going to go back to Piper and Adonis, and you watch wrestle. And I encourage everyone to go back, watch that match from WrestleMania 3. It was such an amazing, you know, growing up watching wrestling in the 70s and 80s, Roddy Piper didn't wrestle all the time, but he was so hated. He was, you know, when he doing the Piper's Pit, and he was like, and you wanted to see this guy get in the ring and get his butt kicked. You wanted to see after he smashed that coconut on Jimmy Snuka's head, you wanted to see Snuka get a hold of him. And it was very rare when you got to see it. And you got the most hated person of all time. Then all of a sudden, in one segment, became that people had sympathy for him because of Adrian Adonis. Right. And looking back on that now, at the time, I didn't tell myself, oh, this is the greatest ever. But looking back on it now, I'm like, that was huge, to take the most hated person and have people develop sympathy for them. And then turn the tables. Now everyone wants to see you get your butt kicked and wants to see him doing the butt kicking. And that match, Meltzer would probably give it a 1/4 star for whatever that's worth. But there's no way you can deny the fact that everyone in Detroit, Michigan was just captivated by that match and just losing their mind watching Piper throw Adrian Adonis around. And I think that's one of my favorite feuds. And then of course, you know, how could you not put Andre Hogan? That was a year buildup for that. You know, growing up as a kid, everyone loved Andre the Giant, and how heartbreaking it was. I think that was the first villain I cheered for, is when Andre became the bad guy, and that was the first time I cheered.
He was a very rational villain, if that makes sense, because it makes sense that he wanted his title shot.
And quite frankly, that's a true villain believes what they're doing is right.
Yeah, and believe they're the hero.
Yeah, and it wasn't. And you know, as a kid watching this, I'm like, you know, he hasn't. You know, at the time, I believed, oh, no, Andre's never been beaten. You know, it's like, well, he hasn't been beaten, and he's never been given he's not wrong.
Right.
And, you know, it's like, yeah, how come you don't give him a chance? And, you know.
Yeah, and so, I mean,
yeah, so I'd say
there is a kernel of truth.
I'd say those were my two. Yeah, I think those are my two favorite rivalries, because looking back on it, you just appreciate it more and more as time goes on.
Right.
And
All right, Eddie.
with my next question, what part of the business was completely different than you imagined it whenever you were first starting to get into it? Like what was something that was really you just wasn't expecting it to be a certain way?
I think the thing that surprised me the most is that I came in understanding the promotional side of things a little differently coming from the music world, being a musician and like wrestling, I always made more money on merchandise than the promoter. When my bands went on tour, we relied on t-shirts and CDs and records and stickers and buttons to fill up our gas tank. And if we had a good night, to get a hotel room, or get, hit the Denny's after the show. The promoter, yeah, we got some money from that. And so I think the thing that surprised me the most is that still to this day, how many wrestlers haven't picked up on that? It's like, I'll go to independent shows and as a fan and not see merchandise for the wrestlers, or even the promotion, And so I think that's the thing that surprised me the most is that a lot of the wrestlers aren't seeing the opportunities that they have. There's fans that want to buy your shirt, or they want a sticker with your face on it, or they even just a autograph.
Yeah.
The fans want that. They want that little keepsake. And I think that's the thing that surprised me is that not a lot of wrestlers picked up on that. But through independent punk rock, that was how we got from town to town. That's when we toured the U.S. That's the only way we made it from town to town.
Right. That's something that Matt Cardona really preaches a lot, is just set up a table. It doesn't really cost that much to get 20 pictures just done up at, Walgreens or CVS on the way there. You don't even have to put that much effort into it, but a lot of people don't. And, he sits there and he gets his, whatever his commission is. And he talks about it on, Twitter all the time. He's like, I got paid whatever for this, appearance, but I tripled my money just in autographs and stuff. And, sure, he's a big name right now and people want his autograph, but there was a time where people didn't want his autograph. They didn't really care that much about him. But you know what? He was still putting himself out there, and now he's got to the point where people do care. So I think that says a lot about kind of persevering and, just weathering that storm.
And back to like fans wanting it, it's like whenever I like choose to like buy merch or everything, it's like it's my way of like giving back to the business. It's like being a good fan and actually buying the merch and like supporting it, and obviously like doing the podcast and putting stuff over. But I think maybe fans have the same mindset, and that's why they're like, oh, I'm going to support my favorite wrestler or support the business that is providing all this content, and also just that I'm a big fan of and that we all love.
Yeah, and it's like that with the independent music. You have these fans who it's like no matter what kind of music you're into, there's a smaller version playing that exact same style of music that you can go see at a club or a coffee house or a
street.
dive bar.
The street.
And you know what? They're selling that T-shirt for $20, and they're making maybe $5 or $6 off that shirt. But that $5 or $6 that they're making off that shirt is going to help them get to the next town. It's going to help them get some food in their system, or maybe if they sell enough, so they're not sleeping in their car or sleeping on someone's floor at night.
And not only that, but your support is going to mean 20,000 times more to that, small indie rocker with 100 followers than it's going to mean to that, big name that has 10 million followers.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I think websites like Pro Wrestling Tees and Brainbuster Tees, why they're so important to the independent wrestlers, is because maybe it's like I'm going to bring some shirts with me to Kentucky, but you have to spend like $200 or $300 to get a good amount of shirts done, so that you don't have to sell them for $30 each to make a buck off of them. You have to get a good amount of done, and not everyone has $200 or $300 just sitting around. And so, but if you upload an image to Pro Wrestling Tees, you can have your own shirts, and you can direct people. That's like people, maybe you don't have shirts, but you know what? you have a little QR code. It's like, hey, click that QR code, put your phone over that. It's going to go directly to my Pro Wrestling Tees page. Buy a shirt from me, and, next thing you know, a couple months later, you're going to get a little notice. Hey, you just got, $75 added from your to your PayPal account. And that can help, because then after a while, then next thing you know, that wrestler can buy a new pair of boots. They can get a new set of tights, or maybe they can get, their own shirts that they can have at the shows and things like that. So there's opportunities for these wrestlers out there to fund what they do,
Right.
No one's making mortgage payments off of it.
Yeah, no,
But
you have to
I
love
could
it to do
buy
it.
another set of boots.
You have to love it to do it.
Yeah.
It's funny. We kind of talked about going through that and bringing stuff to the show, and like that's really good advice. What other advice would you give to an aspiring pro wrestler outside of maybe the merch and stuff like that? Like, what are you saying to the fresh-faced rookie who's about to step into their first ring?
Realize your part on the show. Know your part on the show, that you're part of a show, not just your match, not just your part in the match. And it really is, watch other matches, and you might have to change things on the fly. If I'm going to do a certain move, and then earlier I've seen that another wrestler's already done that move, all right, well, I'm not doing that move. Or if I find out later, like if I didn't look up any matches from TSW, and I wanted to do a monkey flip, but then I find out then and there, oh wait, no, Mike Murphy does a monkey flip. Well, I'm not doing that. And I'm not going to say, well, I'm not going to be, because there's been times I do an STO, a standing takeover, and there was another wrestler who wanted to do that, and I just let them know, hey, just letting you know, I do the STO, and they wanted to argue about it, and I'm like, I only got a handful of moves in me. It's like, you've got all these, you've got a whole catalog of moves you can do. All I'm asking is if you can not do that one move in your match. And they didn't get it. They felt insulted that I was asking them to not do a certain move. And so I think the biggest advice is like realizing that you're part of a show, not just your 10 minutes, but you're part of a show. So if you're in the opening match, you're not going to pull out all the stops, because then where's the show got to go to from there?
Right.
It's like I'm of the mindset, and people may disagree, that none of the matches should have fighting outside the ring until the main event or the semi-main event. That the show should build up to that kind of chaos, and that the first couple matches, they're more ground and pound. They're more, just then the show slowly builds up. And when you got an entire roster that has that same mindset, people are going to walk away going, that was the best show ever. I'm going to come back again. I'm going to bring some friends.
That's something, it's very reminiscent of something I heard DDP say in his book. He talks about how, when he really was getting in with the Diamond Cutter and really starting to get over in WCW, that was around the same time that Triple H was kind of cutting his teeth in WWE, and he had started using a cutter. And it was one of those things where it's like, we always say on the podcast, and I'm sorry for swearing, but we always say fuck tribalism, and this was very much a moment there where DDP called up Triple H, and he said, "Hey man, that's something I'm starting to use as my finish. I'm using the Diamond Cutter. It's getting over. Can you not use the cutter?" And that's what led to Triple H saying, absolutely, I respect you. I see what you're doing. It doesn't matter if we're in different companies. And he started using the pedigree, and then that became this whole, thing on its own, one of the greatest moves, most recognizable moves of all time. And that was all because two people had a conversation, and, even though they were on different sides of the aisle, they were respectful to one another, and they had enough respect for the business to say, okay, this makes sense.
And they both got it.
Exactly. And it's just all about, thinking about the bigger picture, not just thinking about the 10, 15 minutes that you're out there and your contributions to that 10, 15 minutes. And it's really easy to have that mindset where all I care about is looking good and getting all my shit in. sorry for the profanity, but that's
We
you know,
swear
it's
all the
like,
time. I just don't know how you felt about it.
yeah, well, that's unfortunately that's an epidemic here on the West Coast, is these wrestlers who have to get all their stuff. And it's like, but what does that do for the
Do
match?
you really need
You know, if
that
you do
10th
all these
super kick?
moves, yeah, yeah, no, it's like, and then like I'm, you know, my age, I, I'm a big fan of, once again, fourth wall down. I'm a big fan of calling it in the ring and reading the fans. I'm a big fan of that. And a lot of wrestlers, there's this one wrestler that I wrestled recently, and he wasn't comfortable with that. I'm like, just listen to me. Listen to me. First off, I'm deaf, so if you call something, I'm not going to hear it. I'll call your offense. I'll call all this. Just listen to me. And we're listening to the fans, and he comes in, he's like, well, I felt like I didn't have to do anything, and we got over. I'm like, yeah. So you don't have to get, just because you know. It's like music. Just because you know how to play a drum fill doesn't mean you have to do it at that part of the song. If the song doesn't require a drum fill, don't do a drum fill.
Right.
You know, Ringo Starr, one of the greatest drummers of all time, you hardly notice him in the song because he plays to the song. And it's like that with wrestling. Your match should play to the show.
I think that's a great place to kind of leave things off here. Thank you so much for your wisdom that you've brought to us and these stories. We really appreciate everything you've said to us and giving us this time out of your very busy schedule. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate this time.
yeah, and we are so excited to see you for the 12th anniversary TSW. Obviously that's coming up. Mr. Eddie Wade will be part of the show. Our own Joey Hudson will be a part of the show.
What's the Corbin, Kentucky nightlife like, Eddie?
Well, I actually live like an hour or two away from Corbin in Tennessee, so. But I mean, there's not. I won't lie to you. I've been there. I've been there a bit, but there's not much. Not much.
We'll just have to make it happen.
Yeah.
We'll make it happen. How far are you from Johnson City?
I'd have to look it up. Right? I'm not sure.
That was one of my favorite towns to play in Tennessee. Tennessee is beautiful. I think that's what blew me away so much about the first time I saw Tennessee, is how amazingly beautiful the plains are there, and it's just like the gorgeous the sun and the lush plains of the fields there, and I love it. And Johnson City was just, man, that was a crazy good time in Tennessee.
I feel like that sounds familiar. Like if I've heard people like, oh yeah, we're going to Johnson City for like a day or two, and then yeah. So I feel like that's not crazy far from where I'm at.
But anyhow, what I wanted to say before is Eddie and Joey will be in attendance, and I just kind of wanted to throw a little bit of a teaser out now to say that Ring Post Daily, in conjunction with Traditional Southern Wrestling as well as the Marvelous Pro Wrestling Academy, we have a very special announcement that will affect multiple lives as well as the TSW industry. Well, I shouldn't say industry, but TSW company. And that's something that we're going to be announcing, and we'll be kind of laying some little kernels of information out leading up to the show. So I kind of wanted to get that announced and just say, keep an eye out on things that are happening both on the TSW side, on the Marvelous Pro Academy side, and on, of course, Ring Post Daily. But yes,
Very
again,
interesting.
Cliffhanger.
very
Cliffhanger.
interesting. It's an exciting development that Ring Post Daily and TSW has been coming together for, and we've been working on this for a couple months now.
Awesome.
But,
Looking forward to it, and looking forward to coming out there.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we also want to put over your seminar. El Flaco, as well as Michael Sean, will be leading a seminar on June 1st, right?
Yes,
Okay,
June 1st, 9 a.m. to 12 noon.
Okay, and so it's a day of the show. And the best part about these seminar shows is if you get a ticket to be part of the seminar, whether it's just to observe, whether it's to actually be part of it, you're also going to get admission into that 12th anniversary show. So it's very advantageous for you if you have any sort of interest in becoming a wrestler, or maybe you just want to see behind the scenes. If you're going to the show anyways, throw a couple extra bucks their way. It really helps out both the wrestlers, the teachers, and you're going to get an awesome experience with El Flaco, with Michael Shawn, and of course, Mike Murphy and the rest of the Pro Wrestling Academy crew. So we just want to shout them out. Please, attend this seminar. It's one of the best things you will ever do. So, El Flaco, with that being said, do you have any socials that you would like to plug where people can find you? Do you have any other upcoming dates that you would like to let people know about? This is your time.
Well, probably if you go to my Linktree page, that's linktr.ee/El Flaco Loco, only one C in Flaco. That'll take you to all of my socials, my Pro Wrestling Tees page, my Brainbuster Tees page, and also a couple of organizations that I'm a big supporter of: the National Brain Tumor Society and the Acoustic Neuroma Association. Being a brain tumor survivor myself. And upcoming shows, well, it's Cinco de Mayo, so I'm booked on Sunday here in Sacramento. There's a big Cinco de Mayo festival at this big park, and so we're going to do wrestling there. I've got a couple of shows here in Northern California on the 18th, and that's it. Yeah, and then on the 18th, and I'm going to give my body a couple of weeks to heal up and strengthen up for that trip on June 1st. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be great.
Forward to seeing you, and I'll see what I can do to get all those links into the description, so you can just go down there and find all of the links to where Mr. Loco is sending you, as well as maybe we can get some links in there to visit those upcoming events. So from myself, Jesse Henrik, our RPD Prophecy Champion, Tyreek Ramsey, Eddie Wade, the Future Champ, and of course, our special guest today, El Flaco Loco. This has been the Ring Post Daily Podcast. Again, June 1st is the 12th anniversary of TSW. It's the special seminar with Flaco and Michael Shawn. It's a big, big time to be a TSW fan. So go out, catch the show, get a ticket. But from all of us, thank you, have a good night, and happy wrestling.